second to the children of 5. 3 of his grand uncles were IFI pioneer priests, namely Reverend Fathers Adriano Mendoza, Anastasio Corpus, and Luis Corpus. He finishes his elementary and high school education at Gimbalverde, Ceja. He got his Bachelor of Arts degree major in philosophy at Far Eastern University, Manila, before entering the seminary. He graduated at St. Andrew's Theological Seminary in Quezon City, finishing Bachelor of Theology in 1958 and conferred the Master of Divinity degree in 1990. He also had the opportunity to participate in short theological courses at the University of Hong Kong. He was ordained to the diaconate on April 8, 1958, and to priesthood on April 28 of the same year at the Maria Clara Christ Church by no other than the Supreme Bishop Isabel de los Reyes Jr. His first Psalm Mass was celebrated on May 25, 1958 in his hometown of Gimba. This historic occasion was attended by the Supreme Bishop together with other IFI bishops, faculty and seminarians of St. Andrew's Seminary, and dignitaries of the province and municipal officials. His first pious assignment was to minister as the assistant priest in the parish of Malabon for a few months before becoming the parish priest of San Antonio, Cavite City from 1958 until 1969. While being the parish priest of San Antonio, he found a woman for himself and married Celerina S. Mendoza, a native of his city. They were blessed with 4 children, namely Alberto II, Aleli, Alberto III, and Giselle. Father Ramento was elected to the episcopacy on November 29, 1968, and was consecrated alongside with Fathers Soliman Gao and Alfredo Pederis on May 9, 1969, a day after the inauguration of this Cathedral of the Holy Child. Their consecration was done in an ecumenical spirit, having Thaddeus Shelzinski and Most Reverend Philip Strong and Bishop Gilbert Baker, who also prayed and laid their hands to them. He served for a few months as the assistant bishop of the Diocese of Cavite until becoming its diocesan bishop from 1970 to 1993. He was elected the 9th Supreme Bishop of the IFI on May 8, 1993, and served during until 1999. In the second year of his term as Supreme Bishop, he was conferred the Doctor of Divinity by the General Theological Seminary of the Episcopal Church, New York, USA, in 1994, giving him this citation. In 1993, he was elected the Supreme Bishop of the Philippine Independent Church. He is a champion of human rights and a person concerned with peace among peoples and nations, serving as a member of the Continuation Committee of the Christian Peace Conference, as Vice Chair of the Asia Pacific Christian Conference, and sometimes Chair of the Human Rights Committee of the National Council of Churches in the Philippines, and as a member of Christian and Muslim for Peace in Mindanao, one whose understanding of and action in accord with the social imperative of the gospel of Christ and its reconciling love, this seminary is pleased to recognize. It was during the term of Supreme Bishop Ramento that some unprecedented, if not controversial decisions were made. He was the one who ordered the reopening of Aglipay Central Theological Seminary in Moderna City in 1993, amid reservation from some leaders of the church regarding its sustainability. He appointed for the first time an executive assistant to the Supreme Bishop, who was a lay and a woman in the name of Miss Carmen Sita. It was also during this incontinency that he gave his principled support to the Supreme Council of Bishops in approving the controversial ordination of women to the priesthood in October 1996. Earlier in 1994, he took custody of William Tiangson, the alleged Secretary General of the Communist Party of the Philippines, who was captured by the military. The following year, in the formal opening of the peace talks between the government of the Philippines and the National Democratic Front of the Philippines, he was invited to serve as one of the observers to the ongoing peace negotiations. Like the first Supreme globalization is key. In November 1997, the IFR released a statement signed by him entitled Opposing Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC, and Imperialist Globalization. It says, "The present world order is the opposite of our vision, justice for the poor. Instead of giving science the realization of the reign of God, the new world order is ruled by world superpowers whose economic policy is to conquer the world through the doctrine of free market enterprise, while maintaining the hegemonic control to the World Trade Organization. The United States, with Australia and Japan, was able to control the Asia-Pacific economic cooperation. Armed with oppressive and exploitative economic policies such as liberalization from foreign investment, deregulation and privatization, the transfer of assets and social services to private sectors, powerful APEC members plundered the wealth and natural resources of the Philippines. The peasants, the workers, the fisher folks, the national minority, the urban poor and other marginalized Filipinos are suffering in the name of Philippines 2000. Land use conversion, cash crop promotion, cheap labor, contractualization, increase of prices of all commodities make the life of the Filipinos more miserable. Filipino-owned firms become the distributors and retailers of the foreign products. The Philippine government serves not the poor, but its economic masters by selling the dignity and integrity of the Filipino people who Jesus Christ had promised abundant life. After his term expires in 1999, and believing that he can still share something precious in the IFR, he made an option to continue serving vacant dioceses in northern Luzon and accepted appointment as the diocesan bishop of Tarlac from 1999 to 2006. In between this appointment was his willingness to serve also as bishop in charge, the dioceses of Taguban and Lawag, and his election as chairman of the Supreme Council of Bishops in 2005. Aside from his ministry inside the church, he actively participated in different ecumenical and socio-political organizations in the national and provincial levels. In his bio data, presented in bullet points, he had the following involvements: co-chair of the Ecumenical Bishops Forum, member National Social Action Commission, convener Pilgrim for Peace, co-chairman of the Philippine Peace Center, initiator of Peace for Life, a founder member of the Movement of Concerned Citizens for Civil Liberties, elected chairman the promotion of Church People's Response in Central Luzon, one of the judges for the International People's Court in 2005. As a diocesan bishop of Tarlac, he hosted the International Solidarity Mission and the pastoral ecumenical delegation visit of the World Council of Churches and the NCCP in their visit to struggling peasants and workers of Paseo in Tarlac in 2005. He served as a member of the Presidium of the Citizens Congress for Truth and Accountability that tried and gave a guilty verdict to President Arroyo in cheating the 2004 presidential election. For many years, beginning as a diocesan bishop of Cavite, he served as a chairperson of Workers Assistance Center Incorporated in Cavite and board member of Workers Alliance of Cavite. While doing all these responsibilities, even his very simple and humble life, in his modest convento in Paris of San Sebastian, Tarlac City, was generously shared to a feeding program for street children called Lingap Batang Pansama in 2000. This loving gesture of sharing gave him the greatest respect, coming from the vagrant little children of Tarlac City, by calling him Lord. His inbred kindness and his continuity was also seen in one crucial situation that inspired having this modest and ineffective church building compared to other churches within the vicinity of Tarlac City Park. It was Bishop Ramento who offered the place to be used when the bodies of the 7 slain farm workers in the infamous Hacienda Rosita massacre on November 16, 2004 were nowhere to be laid amid the fear that engulfed the community. and the religious people in Luzon. On March 13, 2005, his priest in Lamastarla, Father William Cadena, was ambushed and killed by motorcycle riding men after celebrating the Holy Eucharist in one of his mission stations. Before he was murdered, Father Cadena gathered from his peasant congregation some sacks of rice and shared it to the empty tables of the striking workers of Hacienda Visita. In his burial, Bishop Ramento challenged the people in relation to the sacrifices made by his priest, whose only sin, he said, is to proclaim the vision of the Iglesia Filipina Independiente. It is the vision of the Iglesianos that was given to us by our forefathers, who offered their lives and shed their blood so that we can freely preach the vision of how to become true Christians. Anyone who does not serve his neighbor, especially the poor, anyone who denies support to the deprived, the needy, the oppressed, those who are thirsty, the political prisoners, are not true Christians. A church who worships God but fails to serve the people performs false worship, because the life of a person, his words and deeds, in every minute of his life, is his true worship. Bishop Ramento, being the chairperson of the Supreme Council of Bishops, signed a strong statement condemning the unabated extrajudicial killing under the Arroyo government and the culture of impunity in our society. It was during this period when he was warned by his friends to be conscious of his security, especially when he received death threats himself. His courageous answer was the famous words known to us today when he said, "I know they are going to kill me next, but never will I abandon my ministry to God and my duty to the people." Why he had this enormous courage? What was his motivation not to abandon his God and his duty to the people? By discerning the pages of his many messages and to reflect on the profundity of his beliefs, that one can find his liberating theology, a theology of the Eucharistic vision, a vision of a real Christian community. In his address on the theme, Partnership and Mission, between the Anglican Communion and the IFI in July 1998, Lambeth Conference, he said the following, and I quote, "The liturgy of the Holy Eucharist explicitly demonstrates the Christian view of cooperation and solidarity. First, in the offertory, as St. Paul stated in his letter to the Romans, we offer ourselves as a perfect and living sacrifice. This is giving self to another. Self, the love that God requires us to practice, the love that has no price tag and does not count the cost. Secondly, in the breaking of the bread, Christ said, 'This is my body broken for you.' So we must be broken too. This means that we break our desires and plead for power, our appetite for wealth that leads to ever accumulation of wealth. And finally, the communion. In the offertory, everyone gives according to ability. In the communion, everyone receives according to his or her need. The feeding of the 5,000 illustrates that without greed, everybody can have a just share of the blessing of prosperity." Unquote. The act and Eucharistic vision of Bishop Ramento project a total Christian world where an element of sharing within unity is performed. We can be guided by a vivid description in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2, verses 42 to 47, of this kind of world where the faithful listen to the word, broke bread, and share their goods. Eucharist is one symbol consistent to other symbols, that is, share the word is broken to be shared to others, break the bread, And alas, the breaking of bread yields to the breaking of one's possession, the sharing of goods. This is the world being mediated by the Eucharist. And if that is the world that the Eucharist mediates, then every person who enters that world through the Eucharist should be constructed too as a person who shares. This is the power of the Eucharist that Bishop Ramento believes, but many Christians domesticated into a set of cute rituals, losing its power. Again, in an address by Supreme Bishop Ramento, in one of the sessions in the Lateran Conference in July 1998, entitled Worship in the IFI, he said, "The post-communion prayer says in part, 'May we now be pieces of bread, broken, ready to be distributed to all people.' Here, the worshippers are commissioned to be the priest and the sacrifice to be living the sacraments of the people. Worshippers are sent out as bread broken, which means that they struggle with the oppressed and unjustly treated, even to the point of being oppressed and suffering injustice, is laudable worship." Following his thoughts, we can find that Eucharist is quite subversive, for it mediates a new world that challenges the existing social order. This theological framework is not actually new to this church. Looking back at the first official liturgy of the IFI in 1906, it was the official Divino authored by Isabel Senior that emphasized the elements of the assembly of people, joy and culture in liturgy, years ahead of the liturgical reformation introduced by the Second Vatican Council. The Eucharist indeed challenged the whole world to view reality from the perspective of the poor and heavy-laden, a new social consciousness, a new view of reality, not one of entitlement, not one of wealth and power, not one of possession and greed, but one of a sense of gift. If it is a gift, it should be respected, it should be shared. Bishop Ramento himself wholeheartedly believes that to attain the Eucharistic vision is to offer oneself to be sacrificed. He subscribes to the idea that the transformation of an unjust and oppressed society will never happen unless there are people who are willing to offer their lives. The good bishop seems to do this very well. In his last homily as the incumbent Obispo Maximo in the Eucharistic celebration May 8, 1999, in this very pulpit, he made a reflection about transportation, saying, and I quote, "The challenge is to transform the society into a new heaven and new earth. We, Agnibayans, the congregation of human and women, we in the IFR, the only tangible result of the revolution of 1896 and 1898, are in a possession to lead towards transformation. Are we willing to make steps forward and be counted, remembering that doing so would mean carrying our cross?" Jesus said, "Take up your cross and follow me." Take up your cross, not his cross, because what you carry, the service and the weight of the cross depend on the service you offer. To carry one's cross means denying ourselves to the luxury of life we now enjoy. It means fighting for justice, even when we ourselves will be treated unjustly. It means to take the risk of being accused as communists because we sided with the oppressed, because we recognize Jesus in the least of our brethren. Unquote. Carrying one's cross and to sacrifice is truly difficult. But removing the sacrificial part in the life of Christ, or omitting it in the Eucharist, is not Christ anymore, or Eucharist at all, because Eucharist is sacrifice. Behind the meal lies the reality of the sacrifice of Christ and the Church. In the Eucharist, the Church enters into this total self-giving of Christ. Bishop Ramento cautions us in the trap of merely going through the motions of the Eucharist without serious and complete dedication of our lives that would simply lead us to hypocrisy. For Bishop Ramento, the ritual of Trinitatis Eucharist of thanksgiving for what God has done for us in the person of Jesus is not just repeating His words and gestures, but living His life, sharing His compassion, dying with Him, and worshiping His God as He did in service and humble obedience. As we remember His 5th death anniversary today, Bishop Ramento's Eucharistic vision in relation to his theology of the Eucharist as sacrifice expresses further its depth in relation to the gospel reading chosen for us this afternoon, read by his son. It teaches us of endurance in sacrifice, leading to salvation. For him, the condition of betrayal, false accusations, lawlessness, torture, and even death are realities that challenge our faith and determination, as the gospel says. But anyone who endures to the end will be saved. We are being reminded that enduring the sacrifice of the struggle to the end is the way to experience resurrection. Bishop Ramento is reminding the social activists of today, the progressive people in the church, that the struggle for freedom, justice, and peace should not only to gather strength from the gallantry shown in the Battle of Taguhoy, who fought against their enemies for more than 7 decades. For him, the battle of any committed Christian is until thy kingdom come. For everyone who endures to the end will be saved. Or for anyone who endures the struggle to the end will experience a land full of life, life in its fullness, under the embracing love of the crucified and resurrected Christ. Bishop Ramento's liberating theology had expounded in many of his speaking engagements until he personally experienced it in the end. He endured the pain in the death of his beloved priest, Father William Tadenda, March 13, 2005. He should have tried to save his life after that brutal murder, but only to find him a few weeks later, continue enduring the pain of death in the midst of another bereaved family. As a true shepherd of the flock, we find him consoling a grieving people and sharing the hope of the resurrection to the frightened friends of another victim of extrajudicial killings, the Reverend Edison Lapos, May 12, 2005. In his tribute to this minister of God, he says, and I quote, "We gather here this morning in the presence of the Almighty God to remember Pastor Edison Lapos, who was brutally murdered by taskmasters under the order or payroll of those threatened by his works among the people of God. Before him, others were also murdered, to name 2 councilors, Cadera of Tarlac City, and my priest in La Pastarla, Father William Tadera. The love of Christ in Pastor Lapos' heart became the uncontrolled force that moved him to follow the footsteps of Jesus, leading to the cross of Calvary and to the list of Jesus' brethren. He could have chosen wealth and honor, but he rather sought joy in the service of the downtrodden. died, but died martyred in the arena of struggle, while the heroes who give sign to kill and who sang while Rome was burning enjoyed the glory full of blood of the martyrs. But martyrdom is not the end of life. As from the death of the martyr of Golgotha came the resurrection. In the early morning of October 3, 2006, Bishop Alberto Ramento was found dead in his humble abode in Tarlac City with 7 stab wounds in his harmless body. After a quick investigation, the local police dismissed the crime as plain robbery with homicide. His gruesome death was described by his lawyer, saying that the killer toyed with him like a cat playing with a mouse. The description of this sinister act was chosen by the Sunday Inquirer magazine in its special edition on 31 December 2006, entitled "The New World Order," with the purpose of recalling the words to be remembered for that year. In his funeral service on October 13, 2006, that attended by thousands of people from all walks of life, his former Governor General Secretary Bishop Tomas Villaminas and the 10th Obispo Maximo did his boss in his homily with his words, and I quote, "The powers that be did not like Bishop Ramento's immersion in the poor to build the kingdom of God, where charity, peace, and justice reign. Hence, they killed him. They brutally murdered him. What